Good evening, everybody, and welcome, Chris Shelton.
Hey, thanks. Welcome, everybody. I've been
How's it
looking forward to
going?
this all week. This is going to be fun.
I've been looking forward to this too, and apologies to everybody on my channel watching this because I haven't announced that this was happening. It has been in the works for probably like a week and a half now, but I've been so slammed with work, I literally haven't had a chance to even go in and put a post up and say this is happening on Sunday. And we did try and do it earlier in the week, and then I rescheduled. So sorry, Chris, but we're here finally now, and we're going to be talking about the big hack, the Hackgate, or I'm waiting for some
Yeah,
cool name for people to
that's
come up with.
right. That's right. What should we? Oh my God. Yeah, we should have thought of that. Yeah, that's right. Some special UK hack name or something. Anyway, yeah, it's bad. It's pretty bad. That Scientology's never been at the receiving end of something like this before, and so it's new waters for us to talk about. And I have questions. I have things to talk about. So I thought this would be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you've been around as a critic and an ex-Scientologist longer than I have, so you have a way better grasp than I do on the history of, Scientology documents and data breaches and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Obviously, there was the anonymous movement where it was kind of, this hacking group against Scientology for a long period of time, but that kind of escalated into sort of a social movement more than sort of a cyber group against another. And
Yeah.
I guess my first question for you is like, historically, I'm aware there have been data breaches and hacks and things, but like, what's the context? Like, what's happened in the past that's similar to this?
Oh yeah, there's only a couple things, and it's kind of interesting. So the 90s had a precursor moment to this, which was a hack that was done, but well, it looked like a hack. It looked like a data breach. And the history of this is the only thing, and we should talk about this only because it's the only thing we have to inform us about how Miscavige and thinks and deals with this kind of thing. So in the 90s, very short version of this, there's a lot of details you can look up online about this, including the very interesting phrase Operation Bloody Butt.
What? I've not even heard of that.
Operation Bloody Butt. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a full-on thing.
I'm
So
not even sure I want to know.
I know it's bad. It's kind of like whoa. Um, Basically, okay, in a real super nutshell version here, in the 1990s, Scientology's internet, war was really gearing up, and there was this group called Alt Religion Scientology message board place that people could go to. This is all pre World Wide Web, right? So there wasn't like browsing the way there is now, but people could go to these message boards and share and chat with each other, and there was a lot of activity in this message board on this Alt Religion Scientology, or ARS, site. And critics went there. There was no other place to go to meet. This was the first place online Scientology criticism was actually happening. And Scientology wanted to shut that shit down hard. They hated it, and they felt that they had the right to shut it down. And from those legal fights, there were a lot of legal fights. People were taken to court. Houses were raided. I'm not going to get into all the details of that. When I say that you and I today are standing on the shoulders of giants, those guys are the guys I'm talking about. Dennis Ehrlich, Arnie Lerma, some of these guys who really took some hits. And these guys created the legal precedents that allow us to get to do what we do now. They were the ones who fought for the fair use of the video work, stuff like that, right? And that's where OT3 got out on the internet, was on that message board. So there was a leak from a person who worked at INCOM, the International Network of Computer Organized Management, which is Scientology's computer division, who was fighting with critics online, and nobody knew he was doing this. He was totally unauthorized, totally not okay to do this. But he worked at INCOM. He was the nighttime system operator backups guy. He wasn't anybody. He was just a sysadmin guy. But he was on the mainframe and had access to everything. Everything. And in the 1990s, Incom was that's high level stuff. So all the OSA traffic, all the dispatches, all the super secret stuff, he had full access to that. But he was a hardcore Scientologist, right? And he was a young guy. He was a computer science guy. Anyway, he is fighting with these critics on ARS, and he presents a document that came out of Linda Hamill's, if I remember right. Linda Hamill's a high-level OSA operator. He just took a document from her, a dispatch, a write-up of this thing they were arguing about, and threw it on there. OSA had a fucking cow and a half. They had a field of cows. They were livid. How could this have happened? How could something have been taken out of an OSA INT staff member's files and put on ARS? This was a huge problem, and nobody knew. And it wasn't clear nobody knew how to go into the logs and figure stuff out. Like, it took them time to do that. These are not a bunch of computer savvy people. Again, long story short, Miscavige radically overreacted. And for 4 months, all of Incom was on lockdown. Every staff member, phones taken, locked in their rooms. You have no freedom of speech. You have no freedom of movement, nothing. They were just told this. They had all their cell phones and everything collected up, IDs, put into envelopes. And this was all done by an ethics mission that was sent by Miscavige personally. And he was bragging to the INT staff at the time, according to the reports, about how he was on the case investigating this, and he was going to find this person who leaked this and ruin, doing the whole ruin them utterly thing. Well, it took him 4 months to figure it out and find out who this leaker was and get this person nailed and kicked out of the church. And I understand that they really raked this guy over the coals before they kicked him out. But all the other staff of Incom had nothing to do with it, didn't know anything about it. But they were told right from day one, your out ethics, suppressive reasonableness allowed this to happen. And so the very fact that it happened is indicative of your guilt. And that's a point I want to underline, because I think that is very much what's going on now. Because the same attitude imbues this organization. So for 4 months, he has these Incom Sea Org staff, the most dedicated Scientologists you're going to find anywhere, under lock and key, basically false imprisonment and a whole bunch of psychological abuse. And then they stopped. Then after 4 months, it was done. They had reduced the size of Incom apparently by about 80% or something. Like, it went from something like 50 or 50 staff down to like 10, and they just booted all these people and cleaned house, right? And so ever since then, I don't know what you think about Scientology's computer systems for your use of them, but anachronistic and outdated and a little not useful might be a few words you could use to describe Scientology's computer systems. And it's all the product of these 10 guys, right? Income. That's all that's all Scientology has for computers, is those guys at that level. So they are overworked, obviously underpaid, and are just overwhelmed with modern tech. They're good people, and they are technically savvy people. I've met them and I worked with them when I was in the Sea Org. But ultimately, they are incapable of doing the job that they've been given. And so this hack just brought all of that back into my mind, right? Because it's sort of the earlier beginning to all of this in the 1990s. That was Scientology's real first introduction to that kind of activity. And they reacted very badly, basically got bitch slapped into place through the Streisand effect, right? All the way back in the 90s. Then they did it again with the Tom Cruise thing and the turtleneck video, right? And that's what turned Anonymous onto them, is they had lost hard against these internet critics and ARS. They played that they had beaten these guys, but the court system did not support Scientology in any of their maneuvers. Ultimately, they had to pay back and do all the things. So the 2000s come along, and the Tom Cruise turtleneck video leaks, and Scientology tries to get it taken down. And it was the act of them trying to take it down that alerted Anonymous. And they went, well, you're trying to do what now?
Yeah.
Censor the internet, right? And so they went to town, and we all know, and I've praised Anonymous up one side and down the other, because it was the most effective fighting force that has ever taken on Scientology. And it was a year, 2 years of international protests and all kinds of fun and games. And it all kind of started because Scientology tried to swing its weight around on the internet again.
And
And
I think,
so, yeah,
sorry, I was just going to say,
yeah,
I think there's a key difference there between this hack and the anonymous movement, particularly. Is the anonymous movement, from my understanding, was all about promoting free speech and saying, hey, you can't censor the internet. And because you are trying to restrict people's fundamental human rights to freedom of speech and so on, we're
yep,
going to come after you with the full force of our, social movement. So
you
it was
got it.
kind of, it could be argued that it was ethical because it was like, we're trying to
Mhm,
promote human rights and so on here. Whereas
mhm.
this hack that's happened in the last couple of weeks is a totally different ball game, because
You got it.
Lin, which is the Russian cyber criminal group who have done this, are not, as far as I understand, ethical hackers that are trying to promote free speech. They are a criminal group who hack into organizations, government bodies, big corporates, their systems, and tries to steal data and hold it ransom and say, we're going to publish all this personal information unless you pay us money. They
Yep.
double encrypt all of the files, so even if they pay the money to get the files back, they can't open them, so they have to pay again to get them decrypted. And it is absolutely a crime, and something I want to make really clear from the get-go is I do not support hacking. I do not support criminal organizations. I do not support this group. But I do think there is a duty and a public interest in reporting on the outcome of this criminal activity, which is the documents that we've got so far, because they reveal, I believe, potentially further incriminating information with regards to Scientology. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very needful words. Let's be
Mm,
clear that this current thing is not the same as
mm,
what's happened before. I'm really glad you made that point, because it's really sort of two sides of the same coin, right? Because you kind of have this white hat versus black hat hacktivist activity. And Qilin, this group, I guess that's how you say it, right? It's Chinese for unicorn, but it's a Russian group, and this group is not on any kind of moral crusade. It would be super clear about that, right?
mm.
As you just said. So it is different in that way. Scientology is really not a targeted victim; they're more a random victim.
Mm.
Qilin rather is a group that goes after hundreds, thousands of different organizations, entities, corporations, all on the basis of whether they can pay. And so they've estimated, for whatever reason, Scientology got on their list because Scientology is an organization that has money. And that's literally the only deciding point, as far as we can tell, for how Shailene chooses their targets. Scientology was one of, I think, 400 or something people, or corporations rather, who were gone after
Mhm.
in this last quarter
Yeah,
from this group.
and from a UK perspective, Chilin recently, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but from the news that I've read, they hacked some. We have the NHS in the UK, which is the healthcare system. Obviously, we have free healthcare in the UK. I mean, it's free, but we do pay for it through taxes. But nonetheless, hospitals and doctors' surgeries and so on all use this unified system. And Chilin hacked some part of that system, I think, for
Mhm.
one particular hospital, and people died as a result of this hack because there was, some difficulty in getting the right information to the right doctors or something along those lines. And so there have been real life consequences of the actions of this group's hacking. And that's why I think it's really important to say that I'm not reporting on this because I think it's, we should support this group. I don't think that at all. I think that one of this group's many victims is obviously right in our ball court, and they've released some very interesting documents, potentially may release more, and I think we should talk about them.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean we should praise Chi-Lin and be like, wow, what an amazing thing they've done, right?
Oh, the exact opposite.
Yeah.
The exact opposite. This is not a praiseworthy event in any way. And
Mm,
just because, my enemy's enemy is not my friend here, right? That's not what this is at all.
mm,
This is a hacker group that is totally murk. They just do everything they do just for money.
mhm.
And personally, I don't see eye to eye with that.
Yeah. No.
I have real problems with hackers and hacking, and professional league, government level hacking is a plague that we are having to deal with right now. It really is. It has far-reaching consequences that are far, far, far more. Well, as you said, people die
Yeah.
as a result of this, right? It is serious.
Yeah.
So yeah. So whatever results from this, yeah, I agree with you that.
Yeah. And I also think it's important to note that Scientology here are the victims of a crime, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't mean they get my empathy or sympathy, or I'm saying, oh no, poor Scientology, right?
No,
Like,
exactly.
they are equally as guilty in so many other ways. But I think it's important to talk about the documents. And someone here has just brought up in the chat, and this is a really good question because you mentioned there that Chi-Lin hack and hold information ransom for money. This question is perfect. Do we assume that as there have been no further leaks that Scientology have paid a ransom of some sort? And my question was going to be, do you think they'll pay?
I do. Once I learned that our anonymous mutual friend, who has some information about this kind of thing, that there are, because I'm not a computer guy. I know a lot about computers as to how they technically work, but I'm not a modern computer guy at all. It's just way too whatever at this point, right? So when I learned that there's hacking insurance, ransomware insurance, that this is actually like a whole cottage industry now. Well,
Mhm.
of course, it makes sense. It would be, because ransomware is an international problem at government operator level, right? So clearly, this is a $1 million-billion activity.
Mhm.
And so when you have money like that flowing around, then of course you're going to find service industries setting up around it to
Mm.
protect people's money. This is how this all works. And so apparently these packages cover not only paying the ransom, but every single thing having to do with dealing with the group, paying the group, securing the situation, like everything is all part of this insurance thing you get, as it was described to me. And it was described in such a way that it was like, yeah, they probably have this,
Mhm.
right? This is probably something that the church did do. Now, that being said, I don't know and can't speak to whether the insurance would pay out for this or not. We just don't know enough about what caused it. Was
Mhm.
it, do we know? Do we have any kind of like actual substantive
No.
what was the breach?
Yeah, and I think that's something that is really interesting when we do
Yeah.
find out. I'm sure it's only a matter of time. It will come out through the woodworks. Is what the security breach actually was. We still don't know exactly what system was accessed. We don't know how access was gained. We don't know if it was through something as simple as a user having a poor password or whether they had some brute force huge, massive scale attack on their data set. We literally don't know,
Yeah.
and it will be interesting to find out, when we do. But with hacking insurance, my understanding is that, like with car insurance, right, is
Mhm.
there are stipulations where your insurance wouldn't be valid in certain situations. If you forget to pump your tires up, or you don't take good care of your vehicle and then something happens to it, you probably won't be insured for that because it's due to your negligence. My
Exactly.
understanding is with hacking it's the same thing. If you might have this insurance, but if they manage to gain access just through somebody having a simple password with no special characters or numbers in it, well, that may actually invalidate your hacking insurance because that's kind of your own fault. So
Right.
we just don't know, and it will be interesting to find out, I'm sure.
It will. It will. Right now, we know all we know for sure, what we can deduce for absolute sure, is that this is a weapons grade professional level hacking operation. That Scientology was not specifically targeted, but was on a list of targets to go after. So the amount of effort exerted to do the hack was probably not, Tom Cruise Mission Impossible level stuff, right? Nobody's floating over the floor trying to break into the UK. And so in other words, it was probably a sort of a generalized, okay, let's send this out, or let's send this kind of thing out, like a phishing email or some kind of a, human hack kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see if anybody, it's sort of like the phishing lure kind of thing. This is what I imagine happened. We don't know. I could be wrong. But based on what we know, we can deduce some of these things with some certainty.
And when you have a big organization like Scientology, a phishing email is probably actually quite an easy way to gain access to a system, because there are so many people who aren't technically trained, that have no access to the outside world other than, what they're told they can see and read and so on. They may not be clued up on how phishing emails work. If they get an email that looks official, from some, from Microsoft or from, Outlook or whatever, some organization that they use their software every single day and it looks kind of official, click on a link and they go, oh, type in your login, there we go, fine. And then it throws up an error page and they go, oh, that didn't work, never mind. Probably have no idea that they've just given their information to hackers. It could be very, very simple like that, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because that's probably the easiest way to gain access to their systems.
Absolutely. And it's too easy. Like I said, you send out 500 at a go to these targeted organizations, and you see who comes back, right? It's a numbers game. And I think that's probably how they did it. Or they could have, done the USB dump in the parking lot or something. There's so many different ways to get people to let you in, right? And as somebody noted, it's entirely possible that they're not updating their systems, right? We happen to know, I have personal knowledge of this too from all the way back when I was in, that they're more than a little slow in all their upgrades and updates and keeping everything up to speed and monitoring and actually administering their systems. There's a lot I could say, but let me please trust me when I say these people barely know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. And you'd imagine, right? Again, this is where logic, just simply defies Scientology. Any organization the size of Scientology and with the wealth that Scientology has would normally hire an external cybersecurity company or IT facilitator or some tech organization to handle all of their systems, because paying this organization would probably be safer and better because they're the pros, they know what they're doing, but it would require a level of trust. But that's what this organization does. And Scientology, being Scientology, doesn't do that because they trust absolutely no one. So all of their systems are managed in-house by this internal organization we talked about earlier, Incom. And there might be a couple of computer science grads in there who, went to university or had a job before joining staff. But let's not forget the majority of management Sea Org staff now it's an aging population that probably trained in computers in the 90s and have very outdated understandings of how these things work. So because of their lack of logic and their inability to trust people, it has left them vulnerable. And I obviously haven't access to Scientology computer in over a decade. 2014 was when I left staff. But back then I remember the computer system being way outdated. We were using Windows XP in 2014. And I remember going in and thinking, wow, this is I remember when Windows XP came out, and I know it's still not as old as it is now. It was kind of closer to its launch back then. but it's still at like over 10 years old, this system. And I remember opening up the central file system to you like send some letters out or whatever, which is just an email. And it's this like blue screen that looks like some 90s like form that was made in Dreamweaver or something 20 or 30 years ago. And it just hasn't changed. And I'm sitting here going, and we're at the forefront of spiritual technology. Like, how are we using this system? I don't know if they've updated things since then, but I really wouldn't be surprised if they haven't.
No. I mean, there's still, I mean, the finance system of Scientology is still using, DOS-based system. I mean, it's just, you're like, wow, you can't even get that stuff converted over to a Windows system.
Yeah.
They went with Windows. They should have gone with Unix, but they went with Windows. And so in the 1990s, right, they used to operate on old mainframes and Unix systems, and those were good, secure, expandable, scalable systems. But the world went Windows, and Scientology went with them. And I don't know. I have a very low opinion of Windows personally, especially now. But it's just kind of gradually gotten worse over the years. And I absolutely support everything you said about their personnel situation. They don't have savvy operators there. And somebody pointed out in the comments, and this is a good point, that there are a lot of high-level Scientologists who run or own high-level computer companies. Craig Jensen
prime
has
example.
been, Master Tech. I mean, these companies, or not Master Tech. What's Craig Jensen's company?
Earthlink.
Yeah, no, not Earthlink. It's that's another Scientologist. Craig Jensen is a guy who had a computer company that did encryption and compression software, and millions,
the irony.
big money, right? But Craig Jensen isn't a guy that David Miscavige picks up the phone and says, "Hey, how can I do my systems better?" That conversation doesn't ever happen. So it's not that there aren't the potential for Scientology to have amazing, updated, Chrome, awesome systems. They've got the people in the group who know how to do that, but they're not Sea Org.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the Sea Org, you're not in the Sea Org. So you don't get to know what our computer systems have on them and that kind of thing. In other words, I'm saying the security issue is more important to Miscavige than efficiency or operability, right?
And think about how siloed.
You get shocked. Sorry.
Oh, hi Jeffrey. Per LRH secret incom comms, OSA has identified the Duke of Chug as the prime suspect.
If you know the story, that's very funny. Yeah. So that's what really gets it gets in their way, I think.
Yeah, and like think about how siloed everything is in Scientology. If you don't work in OSA, you're not going to have access to OSA files. If you don't work in ethics, you don't have access to ethics files. Even if you do work in OSA UK, you're not going to have access to files of OSA int. If you work at OSA int and you are not involved in fair gaming this one particular SP, you're not going to have access to the files to do with fair gaming another SP, because Miscavige and the church as an organization is so paranoid about data being leaked and breached and so on. And also, I presume, the awareness of the fact that all of this is highly incriminating and could be damaging to the church if it was ever leaked. Everything is siloed.
Yeah, it's a little hard to give somebody access to all your files when your files detail all your criminal operations.
Precisely. So even within the organization, there are multiple layers of protection. So never in a million years could I ever imagine the church hiring an external firm, even one owned by and run by Scientologists, to manage all of their systems. Perhaps they might get an external company to come in and install their server at a local city level org one day, but they're not going to have some organization on retainer managing their cybersecurity, right?
No, they're not. And this could be a catalyst for change in that direction if Miscavige were somebody who actually, cared about such things or demonstrated that he was savvy in this direction. but I think he's old school. I think he's one of those old guys you're talking about, right? I mean, he is, in his 60s now, and he just doesn't get it. And I don't think he wants to get it, needs to get it, right? As far as his world is concerned, things operate because he says they do. And so as long as that's true, he doesn't have to worry about it. So a hack like this, I think, once he realized or was informed or briefed that it was an external entity, this is pure money motivation, this is not a moral crusade, this isn't Anonymous 2.0. I think once that was clear to him, it became a very clear issue of pay them or not. And how do I use this to advantage to beat on my people more? And I think that's kind of the calculus he runs. And it's so kindergarten simple, that you're like, really, that's all he would do? And it's kind of, yeah, I think that's all he would do, is kind of like, okay, is there a threat? Okay, no, it's really just about money. Good. All right, maybe if we just give him money, they'll go away and he'll get whatever advice he's going to get on that. And I honestly have no idea who he would go to or listen to about that. I don't know. In terms of paying it or not. But I do know that to finish the thought earlier, about Sheiling and what we can surmise from this is that because of the leak, all the documents that were leaked, we know they didn't pay right away. So we don't know if they're going to. So it's really just suppositional. But we know from the documents that were leaked that it looks like it was operational information related to Treasury and personnel at the CLO UK base.
Yeah. And let me ask you as well, just before we get into the actual files. Say, for example, they don't have this hacking insurance, or they do and it doesn't pay out. And Scientology decide, okay, out of our own pockets, we're going to pay these hackers because we don't want this information to be leaked. And they pay Qilin however much money they ask for, 50 million, 100 million, whatever it is. Again, we don't know how much they're asking for.
Probably won't be even that much, but yeah.
But does that then create a problem? Because what that would mean is you have a US tax-exempt religious organization using tax-exempt dollars to pay directly a known Russian criminal group. Does that create any problems for them from a tax status perspective, like using tax-exempt dollars to pay a criminal group?
No, that would, because it's not a criminal operation on Scientology's part. As you correctly said, they're the victim of a crime here. And the common advice now is don't pay. I mean, as from the research I did, only 18% of ransoms were paid in the last quarter, 2025, right? Like worldwide. Ransomware is a declining industry as far as, people paying. But that's the statistics of it, but that doesn't mean anything in terms of David Miscavige's decision making, right? But it would not be a factor in anybody's rule book that Scientology cannot use taxpayer money to pay someone who's doing this to them. That wouldn't be a legal issue of any kind. I know that for sure.
Interesting.
It might be a more, I could see the argument, but what are they supposed to do, right? Like if this is any other church, what are they supposed to do?
Update their passwords more regularly, Chris. That's what they should do.
But, if they do get hacked, what are you supposed to do, right? I mean, if this was the Jewish synagogue down the street, we wouldn't be asking questions like that, right? Because it's like, well, of course they have to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's unfortunate, and like I said, it's not a crime I support, but the document leak did give us some information, and we shouldn't ignore it.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen so far only scratches the surface, right? They have released 22 screenshots of documents, I suppose as proof, hey, look, we have access to these documents. We're not making this up. Pay us the money.
That's right.
And this is what I don't quite understand, is like what system they gained access to. I mean, I kind of do have a bit of an understanding, but also it is still vague, right? Because there's financial planning, right? There's spreadsheets about money spent on security at the IES event. There's knowledge reports. There's random pieces of, CSWs and such, but
Yeah.
they're all generally different systems within Scientology, and it's going to be really interesting to see what else they release, if they do release any more, because that will tell us whether they've just managed to hack the sort of temporary server that people dump files on while they're
That's
sending an
right.
email or whatever and forgot to delete,
Yep.
or whether they have actually gained access to the whole financial planning system or the ethics file system or whatever, because
That's
a
right.
KR is something that when I was in, it was a handwritten thing or typed down, printed. We'd save it on the computer. I might email it or, send it through the telex system or whatever, and then delete it. Maybe people don't delete their KRs. But if they actually gained access to the ethics system and there are bunches of more KRs on there, who knows what they contain? And that could
But
incriminate Scientology further.
And I thought so too. And I'm only going to throw this back at you on that, because I had the exact same concept until I was reminded, actually, because this is something I knew and I had forgotten from my experience in the orgs, is that they're not scanning ethics files or CF system files.
No.
They planned to, and then they didn't. And it comes out of the same thinking that was behind printing out all the stat books every week. That story I tell from time to time about how, RTC came in and told us that we couldn't use the graph system on the computers because L. Ron Hubbard fucking wrote that you mark the graphs with a pen or a pencil, and therefore they have to be hard copy graphs. And this was word for word out of an RTC staff member's mouth. And this altered the entire trajectory of West US management stat analysis for years. This one comment made one night on a Thursday during a random fucking inspection in CLO. It wasn't policy. It wasn't something you would find anywhere written down. But the reality of our existence was our computers were ignored because we had to use the paper system, because that's what L. Ron Hubbard said.
Well,
dirt, right? So this, backwards, stupid thinking, right, is anachronistic thinking, you could say, plagues Scientology. It's not a minor thing. It's a big thing in there. And it's unthinkable to people outside because they go, well, of course you would use a computer. No.
Okay.
Not that group.
Perhaps I can shed some light then on how things maybe have changed since you left from and also remember, my experience is now a decade out of date, so things might have changed even further. But when I was in at London Org, stats, for example, right? We would use the computer system to plot our stat graphs and everything, and we would then print it out. And then, because the policy said you have to hand plot them, we would then get a marker pen and draw over the graph, right? So that in the staff meeting, we can hold up the graph and say, here are our stats, right? Or here are my stats or whatever. And we followed the policy by hand drawing it. But we're just tracing over the line the computer has made for us, right? When it comes to CF and writing letters, sometimes we'd write letters by hand, but the majority of our letters out were actually emails that we would do through the CF system on the computer. Then we would print them out and stick them manually into the physical CF folder because it had to be hard copy. So we were using the computer system because we recognized it was quicker, it was more efficient, it made sense. But then to comply with policy, we would also then do a hard copy. When we were writing KRs and so on, same thing. We type it up, send it by email, but then also make sure a printed version goes through the cubbyhole, pigeonhole system so that, we follow policy. Does that make sense?
Completely. And so sometimes when you handwrite or make a note or write your KR real fast or whatever, sometimes you remember to make a copy of it and put it in the file, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes you remember to scan it and stick it in the computer, and sometimes you don't, often don't. And so, you get this half system. It's half measures. And this is what I mean about people not really knowing what they're doing, right? Is you get this half system, this half breed kind of system. And it's this amalgamation of old and new.
Mhm.
And you never know. Here's the goofy part is where you have a group that's trying so desperately to be uniform and be this, single file, hierarchical, monolithic cult
Logical.
thing,
Yeah.
right? And yet, every single place you go, from Hawaii to Albuquerque to London to Twin Cities, you're going to find different levels of integration of this stuff and different levels of acceptance of it. And so you go out to Twin Cities, they barely turn, as an example, they barely turn their computers on.
They're still using typewriters.
Exactly. And you go over to Las Vegas and you got some blue spark hotshot who just came out of college and got his computer science degree, and he's going to network the whole place. And he's all hot to trot, and he's gonna install this whole computer system or get everybody using the incom systems. And so this org is fully digitalized or until he leaves staff. And then his contract's up and he leaves or he blows or he gets yelled at or some shit. And then the computer systems fall apart, right? Because it's one guy. So this is the level of randomness that does affect. I've been in all these different orgs, right? And so this is what you get from place to place to place is it's not the same Big Mac everywhere. And it's not the same usage of the computer systems everywhere. And that's another factor here. Because when we come to UK base, yeah, we have, questions about updated software, password usage, security issues, but we don't even know at what level are they actually utilizing these systems, because we can't assume, we should never assume that they're actually using them efficiently.
Do you know
what I mean?
Do you want to know something that I just realized? Just while you were speaking, I just realized this. I think that they haven't updated their system since I was on staff, because, and this is the telltale sign, and this is why I think this, right? I explicitly remember the CF system, which is what we would use to like email people and respond to inquiries. So if you emailed into the Church of Scientology London through the website or whatever, it would go to some generic london@scientology.org, inbox. And then I was one of the people that could respond to that, right? But it was all through this old archaic 90s system that I described earlier. Essentially, all I was doing is writing a reply to the email, but it's not like I would go to gmail.com and log in and reply like any normal person would.
Right.
I would open my computer, log into my logon, and open up the CF program, and then I could reply. One of the problems, I remember thinking it was strange at the time with this system, is it didn't recognize the symbol for the British pound, right? You have the dollar symbol.
Yeah,
And
the
the
little
pound
L
symbol, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't let you use that symbol for one reason or another. So whenever I was emailing someone about, buying a book or trying to reg them on something, we had to write the word pounds, POUNDS, which nobody in the UK ever writes. Like, why would anyone ever write that word? Because we have a very convenient symbol that we just press a button and it, right? The only context in which someone writes that word is if you can't use a symbol. If Scientology had updated their system, I would imagine that's probably quite high up on the list of things to fix with the outdated system. And it's also something that even if it wasn't, whoever did update their system probably would have noticed that there's this one symbol character that's, commonly used that isn't compatible. So I would imagine that would be fixed. And I know that that hasn't been fixed because just last week, I think it was last week, there are various emails going back and forth between me and the council and Scientology and so on. And in one of these emails from somebody in OSA at St. Hill, they had the a number for something and the word pounds, not the symbol, right?
Right.
So I'm pretty sure that's an indicator they haven't updated their systems. And this poor guy is using the same old thing that I was using 10 years ago that was 20 years out of date back then.
And that's a valid, it's all legit. That's a valid possibility in this Scientology world. And as somebody else commented, obviously, there are businesses out there that are that are like that, right?
Mhm.
That just people just aren't keeping up. And you can kind of imagine you should put Scientology in that slot. Don't imagine them as, some ultra efficient outfit that is just
Mm.
keeping up with the times. They're the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
And that stat graph thing is, as you and I mean, just perfect way to write
I
over the
thought
same
you'd find that funny.
I mean, my God, it's that level of nonsense. It
Yeah.
really is. It's hard to contemplate. You can't really make some of this shit up, but it is like that. It really is. I wanted to ask you a few questions
Yeah.
about the legal nature of some of the leak information, because there were two criminal activities that were sort of exposed, and I'm curious, real super curious, from the UK perspective on
Mm.
this, because it's easy for me to look at it from across the pond and go, oh, nobody's going to care. That's not a big deal. But it probably is, and probably people will care. You've been great at getting people to care. So, so I'm curious about two things, right? One is that it appears that there has been exposure of people working without visas or without valid visas. And the other one is that they are allowing American Church of Scientology corporations to make money to do business in UK without reporting to the UK government that they're doing that.
Mhm.
Um, those seem to be the two things that are coming out of the information we have.
I think also, yes, 100%, but
Okay.
also let's not lose sight of the fact that this is a data breach, right? What we have seen so far are 22 files. Some of them are, potentially incriminating, but in the most part, it's not like we've had loads of OSA documents that talk about fair gaming people and, a hugely mind blowing front page news. There are some interesting points in it, but just the fact that these 22 files have been leaked is a data breach because they contain personal identifiable information, i.e., people's names, right? And personal information about them. And the UK and EU have very strict data laws under what's called GDPR. The fact that this information has been accessed by a third party, whether it is through Scientology's own fault or not, that is something that they are legally obliged to report to the Information Commissioner's Office, which is the independent government regulator that oversees information rights in the UK. So, irrespective of what the documents say, because personal information, names and such, has been accessed and leaked on the internet, they have to report it. If they fail,
This is a legal point. They have to do that.
they have to report
Okay.
it as soon as humanly possible. Now, they're well within their rights to write to the Information Commissioner's Office and say, hey, we've been breached. There's some data on the internet, and we don't quite know how much they've accessed or what it contains. And we're going to need a year or 18 months to do our own investigation to figure out what's been accessed, how it happened, and so on. To
Right.
which the ICO might go, yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you for reporting. We will wait to hear back from you. And they'll be given a time limit to investigate. They don't need to know the ins and outs of everything straight away, but they do need to report it. So if Scientology have not reported already themselves to the ICO, that's a big legal issue. Now, the outcome of the investigation is going to be interesting because data laws are very strict. And if it's found that the data has been breached, which it clearly has, the fine for any UK organisation or organisation doing business in the UK or organisation holding data about people who are UK residents is £17.5 million or 4% of annual global turnover, whichever is higher. That's the maximum
Wow.
fine. It could obviously be much less than that,
How
but
do
that's the
we?
fine.
What is? Is there a FOIA mechanism for you to find out whether they've done that report or not?
Um, there is a mechanism, yes, absolutely. But the ICO currently are massively backlogged with cases, right? And if Scientology were to have reported it as soon as it happened, it in all likelihood, will take 6 months for the ICO to even look at the report before we see any outcomes. So this is a
Okay.
longer term thing. We're not going to get any results or information anytime soon.
Got it.
But the repercussions are potentially huge because Scientology will have to admit there's been a data breach, but they also have to explain to the ICO why they had that data in the first place. Now, one of the documents is a knowledge report, which is somebody reporting somebody else on an out 2D situation, right? Someone's cheating on their wife. Under UK GDPR, the organization that is the Church of Scientology Religious Education College Incorporated, COSRECI, has no legal basis to firstly obtain that personal information about somebody, secondly, to process that information about somebody, and thirdly, to then share it with somebody else, even if that wasn't intentional, right? So, as
Really?
part of the ICO looking into this, they're going to firstly say, okay, why do you have this information anyway? Right? And that's going to be taken into consideration when figuring out the fine. Then they're going to look at, okay, well, how is the information accessed? If Scientology haven't done their due diligence and ensuring that these systems are adequately protected from things like this from happening, that's going to result in a massive fine because Scientology are negligent. Like the data protection repercussions are potentially huge.
That is fascinating. That's an area I know very little about, especially the European style of that. Because, over here, it's also goddamn loosey goosey with the First Amendment, right? Um, and I'm not complaining. I mean, I like the First Amendment, but it makes it difficult for me to understand what restrictions each country in the EU or the EU as a whole is doing about this, because I've heard about this for years, and it presents so many opportunities to really hurt Scientology or groups like Scientology who thrive on and are, in a way, intelligence operations that collect massive dossiers on each individual member and very actively make that part of their operation. It's part of Scientology's whole thing that they have all that information on you and are using it all the time. Um, so it would be very, very interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, because they are going to have to explain to the ICO why they've collected that information, why they've kept
Yeah.
it, and how they've allowed it to be breached or
Can
published
they just
online.
say we're a religion? We get confessionals from people. Fuck off.
That's probably going to be their response. But the
Okay.
ICO will say, okay, but that still doesn't entitle you to hold this personal information about somebody. Like, why is person A writing to person B about an affair between person C and D? Right?
You
All
know
of those
that.
people,
Wow.
like, do you know what I mean?
That'd be
Like,
awesome.
it's not like a confessional where you're going in personally and confessing to something with your priest, and that's being held in confidence, and there's a priest penitence privilege thing going on. Firstly,
Right.
there is no priest penitence privilege in the UK. That doesn't exist, right? That's not a
Right.
thing.
Oh, that's
But
interesting.
secondly, this is four people involved in this personal thing about one of them, right? So why do they have this information is going to be the first question, and just saying we're a religion isn't going to cut it.
Great. Great. Well, I'm down. I'm 100% down because I'm just all Mr. American over here, right? So I can't think about this any other way. So it's really
Yeah,
great to hear that there are other people who think about this differently, right? In terms of like, wait a minute, why do you have that information? Because I'm
yeah,
telling you, over here, all the religion card is a blanket pass to get away with so much, and
yeah.
I'm pretty jaded about it, right? From my position. So
It's
this is
almost
really, really, really interesting and good news for me.
it's
Um,
almost polar opposite in the UK. You've got to remember, our
yeah.
head of state, the king, is also the head of the Church of England, right?
Right.
Like the church and state are not separate in the UK. They are intertwined at every level of government, which has its own problems and so on, of course. But because of that, the UK judicial system, they're not keen on ruling on religious doctrine and saying you can believe in this, you can't believe in that. They still keep a separation from that side of things, but I think they're a lot less scared than they are in the States of looking at religious files and going, okay, that might be your belief, but like this is personal data rights. That you might believe that this is how it works, but you still don't have a right to hold all this data about this person without their permission or knowledge.
Right. Right. Well, that is refreshing. I'm telling
Mm,
you, as over here, it's like, yeah, you don't have any rights. So that might be kind of awesome to see some flex from the government on
yeah.
that towards Scientology. But that's that. So we're sort of thinking that that would be the kind of thing that would be looked at in like a year or two, though, right? That's long
I,
term. That's down the
I
road.
I personally think that that is the biggest thing to have come from this so far in terms of what could potentially result in a financial fine or have real damage on Scientology from a business perspective. Because,
Okay.
a 17.5 million pound fine or 4% of global turnover, that would result in a court case in which Scientology will have to argue what their global turnover is, right? Which is going to be very interesting to observe. So that's, I think, longer term, what may or may not happen as a result of this. But the other two things you mentioned also are really interesting. The
Yeah.
visa thing, let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
In one of these documents, let me share my screen so that people can see what exactly we're talking about. This document is the budget for security at the
Ah,
IES event in
yes.
2024 and then in 2025. So same spreadsheet, but 2 different years. Um, Very interesting document that we can talk about all day. But what strikes me is this line I've highlighted here in red, which
Yeah.
says flights for SOM from EU, £2,200, OSA EU staff to be flown in for event security.
I
So
thought that was so interesting.
this is an admission that Scientology fly in staff from their European offices. Doesn't say which country, but it admits they fly people in to work as security at the IES event,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's a problem for Scientology because in order to work in the UK, you need a visa. Now,
Is that true to be a religious volunteer for a day? Like it's a
so
day trip?
Scientology have the ability, as of 2023 January, the ability to sponsor religious minister and religious worker visas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, my understanding on that is there's two types. There's religious worker and religious minister. And religious minister, which is what the majority of their visas that have been granted are, is you are administering a religious practice of worship. So it's meant for people who are, bishops or, priests or whatever, and you're, or a monk, and you're coming from one country to another, and you're going to go and live a life of solidarity and pray and, help mankind through the practice of religion. Okay, cool. Confessionals, whatever. Scientology's claim legally in the UK, based on their Supreme Court case in which the chapels were designated places of public worship, Scientology claim that their act of worship is auditing, right? So
Right.
if you're an
That's their
auditor,
main ritual. Yeah.
yeah, if you're an auditor, you are administering the religious practice of Scientology.
Yep.
Therefore, in order to be a religious minister under the visa rules, you would have to be an auditor, right? Is what they're saying. So if you come to the UK as a Scientology staff member and you are an ethics person, or you are a course supervisor, or you're
Mhm.
the person that cleans the toilets, anything other than an auditor in your job role, you are therefore not qualified for the religious minister visa
You
because
do
you're
the
not,
other one, the religious volunteer one.
you would have to be a religious worker. Now, the
Worker.
problem with the religious worker visa is there are very strict rules on what qualifies as a worker and what doesn't.
There
Such as, for
are?
example, the minimum wage, right? Even if you're a religious worker in the
What?
UK, right,
Yeah.
you are entitled to minimum wage if you are, for all intents and purposes, a worker. So if you have a job title, you have regular work hours, you have an office, you are expected to show up to work. Whether that's religious or not, you're not talking about going to help at a soup kitchen once a week, and if you don't show up, nothing's going to happen. If
Right.
you are a worker, you are entitled to minimum wage. And if the sponsor of your religious worker visa is not paying you the minimum wage, that therefore makes the visa invalid, or it counts as visa fraud or whatever. So Scientology have to prove that these OSA EU staff, firstly, have religious worker visas, and secondly, are paying them the national minimum wage, and have other protections in place like pension and all the other stuff, and social security and all those sorts of things.
Got
And of
it. So you
course,
can't just fly some folks from Copenhagen over to St. Hill for a day, even if they use Tom Cruise's helicopter, and put them to work and have them guard Tom Cruise or David Miscavige, and then fly them back to Copenhagen the next day or even that night. That's an illegal trafficking thing you're doing if you're not reporting that they don't have visas and you're not paying a minimum wage. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's my understanding of it, yes.
Okay.
Now, there
Okay.
is free movement within the EU and UK to some extent. It used to be a lot more before Brexit, right?
Yeah.
So now it's limited. Same with the US, right? There's nothing stopping me going to visit the US for 3 months and not having to apply for a visa. It's a visa waiver program, right? It's the same within the EU. So if I wanted to hop on a plane tomorrow and go to Paris or Copenhagen or whatever, I wouldn't need to go through a lengthy visa approval process. I could just jump on a plane, say, hey, I'm a UK citizen, here's my passport. They would go, thank you very much, enjoy your holiday, see you later, as I go through security and so on. So there's nothing stopping Scientology from moving their staff around between the buildings. And there would be no checks and balances, at the airport to make sure that they're not doing this.
Right.
But the moment they step foot on the property at St. Hill and start working as security staff, technically they require a visa. So my guess, knowing how Scientology work, is that these OSA EU event staff just haven't applied for the visa because they're going to be coming here under the free movement 3-month visa waiver program thing.
You
right?
bet.
So this document is a kind of gotcha moment for Scientology, because the Home Office, or visas and immigration department or whatever, they now know that Scientology had OSA EU staff fly in to work at the event. So the question will be, okay, well, how many visas have you got at the moment for OSA EU staff? And the answer will be probably none, at which point Scientology will have to explain why they don't have the right visas, right? So this particularly is, I think, indicative of potential visa fraud.
Yeah, I get it, and I agree with you 100%. I think that this and the visa thing have, the fact that there was a CSW of some kind for, what was it, like Joe, Bill, Nancy, like 4 people or something who we have on base who don't have valid visas right now. We need to pay for them and get it. And it's like name, number, here it is, here's the data. It was pretty clear because it was this internal thing, right? Like, we're a little fucked right now. We need to get this guy a visa, right? Something like that.
And this is the document you're talking about, right? This is another indicator that Scientology are not following the rules when it comes to visas, because this is basically saying, look, the following staff in the org do not have visas, and therefore they need to leave the country in November. So this is a recent document.
Can't be paid.
Yeah, they can't be paid because that would tell the authorities that they're working. So we can't pay them because they don't have the visa. So my view of this is an admission that these 4 people are currently working without the right visas, right?
Exactly.
Because why would you need to pay someone who isn't working? It's not a problem that they can't be paid because they don't have the right visa if they're not working, right? So this document is talking about them applying for the right visas. Great. You apply for those visas. You get them, no problem. Then they have a right to work. But the problem is, this suggests that they're working without the visa in the first place. They've come to the UK to start work before they've acquired the correct visa to do that work. Again, very interesting for the Home Office, I'm sure.
Well, and it fits with Scientology's mainline operation pattern, you could say, right? Like how they work. How do they work? You want to get somebody to flag for training. You want to get somebody to the UK as a new recruit for the Sea Org. Get the body arrived to the location, and we will sort everything out afterwards. Get the body where it needs to be
in the shop. Yeah.
And we'll sort everything else out after, right? That's the attitude, because the body or the thing is the physical representation that gets you the statistic. That's the mark I'm making on the wall, right? The hashtag, right? You get the number, get the number, get the number, get the product. Then we'll sort out all the rules.
And who cares about this administrative paperwork with the government? What we're doing here is clearing the planet, which is infinitely more important, right?
Exactly.
This is just a tick box exercise, which to some extent
this is where the word WOG comes out.
Yeah. And look, to some extent, right, I get it. Government bureaucracy, especially in the UK, can be tiresome. It can be, and I know this all too well.
Yeah, I bet you do.
It's not fun, and there are a lot of hoops you have to jump through all the time that quite a lot of the time seem completely pointless and a waste of time, but you have to do it, right? And there are some things that you can get away with not doing, or you can skirt your way around, or you can get away with not doing till later. But when it comes to workers' rights, if it is just one or two people, right, and they'd applied for the visa, then they flew to the UK before they got the visa, they started working, and a couple of days later, they then got the visa, the Home Office are probably going to go, okay, yeah, look, you messed up because they started working, but it's 2 or 3 days, you'd already applied, you'd already got an email saying it's going to be approved, no biggie, right? But this indicates a systemic issue of visa fraud and abuse, because there are multiple people who are working without visas, potentially, and people who are being flown over to work temporarily in event management or security roles without even bothering to apply. They know that they have to apply for these visas to do the work, and they are consciously leaving it to the last minute, to the point where they've been in the UK for 3 months and they now have to leave because they haven't got the visa. So quick, rush this through. We need the money approved so that we can get the visa. Should have applied 3 months ago, right? And that's going to be a problem for the investigators, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, they'll find, because they're just going to find cart before the horse. Well, like we talked about, just over and over and over again. How interesting. Now, the other thing was this business of businesses, U.S. businesses doing business, right? Like that's illegal. That's tax evasion.
Well, yeah, I think how this bit's going to plan out is going to be dependent on what else is leaked or revealed by the hackers, right? Bit of context, Scientology in the UK does business through an Australian registered charity called COSRECI, which I mentioned earlier. They're registered in Australia as a tax dodge. On paper, COSRECI is entirely separate from Church of Scientology International. CSI, which is the US tax-exempt organization, is referred to in COSRECI's founding, memorandum of association and so on, as the Mother Church. But it's not like the Mother Church, CSI, owns COSRECI and it's a subsidiary, or that, it's just referenced as an ecclesiastical. We recognize this party as an overruling mother church that has a religious, seniority to COSRECI. But on paper, they're two separate organizations, and it's not like one is part of the other or whatever.
Right.
CSI,
which fits with the overall model. Let's just say real fast,
yeah,
that all churches of Scientology are independent corporations. They are not subsidiary corporations of Church of Scientology International. They have their own board of directors, their own legal corporate entity, separate from every other Scientology organization.
Yeah, and it's a legal protection, right? So if COSRECI gets sued, or, for example, gets a £17.5 million fine for data breach, then COSRECI can fail, right? COSRECI is built so that they can go, oh, okay, well, they've got this fine and we don't have that money, so we're going to have to bankrupt that organization. Sorry, that doesn't exist anymore. Can't pay the fine. And the church still carries on because there's another entity they can operate under.
Yeah.
It's a legal strategy. Fair enough.
Yep.
Nothing illegal about that, but it's the way it's
Nope,
done.
not at all. Nothing. I wanted to make the point just
Yeah.
so we're super clear everywhere that the way this organization is structured is exactly for that. Protect everything by keeping everything separate.
Yeah, precisely. Now, because of that, you have to tread the line very carefully when it comes to reporting your accounts and things to the relevant authorities.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges in the UK is they're an Australian firm doing business exclusively in the UK. So the UK authorities go, well, it's Australia's problem. And the Australian authorities go, well, it's the UK's problem. They kind of, skirt this line of whose jurisdiction does it fall in. And they get away with a lot of things. But you have to pay close attention to the specifics here. And one of those things is CSI, for example, um, doesn't actually operate in the UK. You can be an overseas entity, you can be CSI, and you can come to the UK and open a business here and open a chapter or whatever and employ people, not employ people. You can invest into a business, any sort of business activity. You can do that, but you have to register it with the appropriate authorities, whether it's Companies House or HMRC for tax purposes. You have to declare it so that the government can look at it and go, okay, cool. Yeah, you've done this. We know about it and you've paid the right tax or you haven't.
Right.
Now, Scientology doesn't have tax exempt status in the UK because it failed to prove that it has a public benefit in 1999. There is a tax treaty between the UK and the US, right? Which means for most things, if you are, for example, a US citizen and you're now living in the UK and you're earning money here because you're employed here, if you pay tax in the UK on your income, the tax treaty means you don't get double taxed and you also have to pay tax in the US. It's one or the other, and it works vice versa. Recent changes in company law has changed the game for organizations because they're trying to crack down on Russian, particularly oligarchs, investing money in the UK. So recently, those tax treaties haven't had the same sort of meaning. Some of them have changed, some of them don't exist. And my understanding is if you are a non-profit organization in the US and you're raising money or doing something in the UK, you don't necessarily have to be registered. You should, but you don't have to register in the UK. But you do have to declare the money that you've raised in the UK and pay tax on it in the UK, even if you are tax exempt in the US, because the UK doesn't recognize your tax exempt status in another country anymore. They used to, not anymore.
Okay.
Anyway, that's all context. But CSI, they're not registered in the UK. They haven't filed any accounts or returns or anything as far as I'm aware. It's all done through Cosrecki. CSI loans money to Cosrecki. Cosrecki borrows to the tune of $100 million. I think it's actually over $100 million now because Cosrecki has to pay tax on its income in the UK. So every year, instead of turning over a profit, they take out a massive loan of $20-30 million from CSI so that they can say, well, we've got this massive loan we've had to pay back. So we haven't made any profit. And therefore, they don't pay tax because the tax is on the profit, right? So their
What an
debt just
interesting
keeps increasing
loophole.
and increasing.
Yeah, yeah. So that's their tax loophole in the UK then you're basically describing.
Yeah, you pay tax on your profits. And so
Right.
they just say we haven't
They
made
just
any
make sure they
profit.
never have any profit.
Yeah, right? Okay, fair enough.
Wow,
Doesn't
you'd think there'd be
necessarily mean
some
it's
mechanism
illegal,
to
but
I mean, that's too simple to see. There must be some shenanigans that they're
it's a
pulling to
very convoluted and complex gray area that they're treading.
yeah.
But that's why this document, bringing it back, kind of full circle here to the point you
Yeah.
raised. That's why this document, I think, is really important because this shows very clearly that the CSI, Church Scientology International, are directly spending money on things like security at the IES event, and
Yeah.
AOSH, which is St. Hill, Cosrecki, are also spending money on things. So
Right.
this is proof that CSI are spending money in the UK on things that Cosrecki are benefiting from, which may
Right.
have tax implications. It doesn't suggest that CSI are making money in the UK, but it will raise the question, particularly, why does CSI need to spend this money in the UK? And have they paid this money, for example, to Cosrecki, who have then paid this money to these people? Or have CSI actually just directly paid them? Like, how is that all money stuff moving, right? It's entirely possible that Cosrecki pays all of these things, right? And then sends an invoice to CSI for these things,
Right.
and then CSI either pays it or doesn't pay it. But then Cosrecki may write it off as an expense and say, oh, well, look, we spent all of this money last year, so therefore we don't have to pay tax on it. But if CSI sent them the money for that stuff to reimburse them, then they can't write it off as an expense. So this document itself isn't necessarily incriminating, but it is a piece in the puzzle that shows and confirms there is a business relationship between CSI and Cosrecki that involves movements of money, and that I think justifies further investigation from the tax authorities, because this doesn't tell us the whole story, but it suggests that there's more to the equation. And so it'll be really interesting to see what else gets leaked and what other pieces of this puzzle we can fit together.
Well, I'll tell you, I would love to see the POs just for each of these line items
Yeah.
under the CSI amounts, right? Because every one of these is a description of what would be submitted as a separate purchase order with the full breakdown and information on who, what, where, how, why, right? And
Yeah.
so every one of these has another document outlining a lot more detail about each of these items, because I have to wonder, 1 7-day apartment in Rockwood and these
Yeah.
things, right? Additional birthing and cash for these expenses, and an ambulance hire. These are just
Yeah.
fascinating things. But this
Ambulance,
business here of this is the close protection team for 1 week,
that's going to
including
be
airport
Miscavige.
pickups. What, the close protection team? What are you talking about?
That'll be Miscavige's bodyguards.
Well, probably, but
Yeah.
from where, and what, I'm just
Well,
curious about the specifics of it, because I think what you're saying is, I think there's a lot of fodder here. Is all I'm saying. I think that there's a lot of details
yeah, and
we
again,
love to get.
you have to think about the intricacies here.
Yes.
Ambulance, right?
Yes.
The reason they have an ambulance, right, is because when you hold a large scale event in the UK with thousands of people coming to your property, part of the conditions of your premises license, or your liaison with the council and your insurance or whatever, is you have to have an ambulance team on site, because that means if you've got thousands of people gathering on your property and one person has an accident, right, you don't want to be waiting around 15 minutes for an ambulance to show up and then figure out which entrance to use and then how to get through your property to the right area to pick the person up, because
Oh,
there's
of
an
course.
event going on, so everything's changed. So
Right.
usually you have to hire an ambulance crew to be there stationed on site all weekend so they can respond if anything happens. So the IES event, which is officially on paper an event put on by Cosrecki, not IES administrations, because again, that doesn't exist in the UK, which is a whole nother kettle of
Mm,
fish. Why are CSI paying for the ambulance? Because CSI aren't the ones who are going to be held responsible if that ambulance has to be called and somebody dies or gets hurt or something and there's a lawsuit. CSI are not the ones that are going to be on that lawsuit as the people responsible for that person's life, right? They're not the ones running the event. It's Cosrecki. So again, it raises the question, why are they paying for it
right.
rather than Cosrecki or ISA or whatever?
Well, I think what this really highlights for us today, just to go meta for a second and
Yeah.
align with some of the commentary here as well, is that we are looking at things through an Al Capone, accountancy lens right now, right? Like, okay, when you get down to the line items of what Church Scientology it gets up to, this is the kind of exposure we could get. This
Yeah.
is why, for me, you see me so frustrated at Scientology's lack of transparency, where other churches and nonprofits are fully transparent on these exact kinds of expenditures. because they want people to know where their tax dollars are going.
Yeah.
Scientology does the exact opposite and then gets up to shenanigans. And it's very interesting because even little details like you sort of think, well, Miscavige has some Sea Org guys who probably tail him around everywhere and bodyguard him, and then he hires these these ex SEALs to guard him and go around with him in black SUVs from place to place. And I guess I sort of assumed, just kind of thinking how the world works here, right, that it was a permanent detail, that he would just write a check every year, get a detail, and they would just go with him everywhere. But instead, it looks from this that it's everywhere he goes, he's hiring a new team or bringing in other people or bringing in other guys, which I find fascinating. Because I'm kind of like, wouldn't you really want a more permanent, settled team that you could start trusting and developing relationships with? No, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to do it the other way. So even little life details like that emerge from these kind of documents. Wouldn't it be awesome if we had 20 more of these?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think Jeffrey here has made a very good point, is it pierces the corporate veil. These
Right.
documents that we've got so far don't tell
Yes.
us the whole picture. There are suggestions that there is some illegal activity going on with regard to visas and the other things we've discussed, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
they are potentially incriminating, but what it has given us is a wealth of information when you scratch the surface and actually look at the fine details that we didn't have before. Does that allow us to make conclusions? No, but it does allow us to make assumptions and reinforce our thought processes on certain things.
You
And
got
if
it.
we do get more documents, it's only going to color that picture in. This has turned a blank piece of paper with maybe a sketch on it into a line drawing, right? It's
You got it.
confirmed things for us, but we
That's right.
still don't have the full picture. So I
That's
think
right.
that there's so much that can be gotten from these documents. I think it's already just these 22 documents are going to land Scientology in hot water with the data protection and such. It's something that I think we should all be keeping a very close eye on. It'll be very interesting to see what happens next.
I agree. I agree completely. And I think that we've only just begun on this. So we'll have to see what Keeleen has to do next, because we really have no idea right now where this stands. We're just full in conjecture land right now. But I hope that, doing this live stream today shed a little bit more light on why, Alex and I are a little bit excited about this.
Yeah. Absolutely. And before we wrap up, because I know we want to try and wrap up before Mark and Claire and so on go live on Blown for Good, I want to just run through
I can't tell if they're actually going live. I might be wrong on that, by the way, today.
All right. Well, we'll try and wrap up sooner rather than later. I want to just go through some of these comments because I've been starring stuff as we've gone through. We'll rush through them. Barbara, thank you for saying hello. Lisa Terry, guess Scientology aren't as clever as they think. Very, very valid point. Hans Christian Schwartz in the house saying Scientologists escaping take more time to realize the mind F than the statutes of limitations. Yeah, that's a whole nother question. Is quite often when we've had data or information leaked before, or documents like Mike Rinder's OSA files and such, it takes a long while for someone to get to the point where they can share them with people and therefore action can be taken. This is a very recent hack. These documents are dated like a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yep.
So it's up to date, new information that is totally within any statutes of limitations for sure. And the beauty of it being an external hacking group rather than an ex-member is there's no, should I share this? Should I go to law enforcement? Should I keep this to myself? Like, there's none of that. It's just, here's all the documents that we've got so far.
That's
brilliant. Right.
That's right. And you understand why we're in a position where this is real fodder for us, because there is such a lack of transparency. We shouldn't have to work this hard from outside the church to see what's going on inside it. To be honest, right? Precisely. We really shouldn't have to work this hard. So it looks like Mark and Claire are off for the rest of the month. I didn't realize that. We can just go on for just a minute, because I would like to, I know you have some other comments and questions to come up. I just wanted to, well, actually, let's get to it, because we're gonna get to it. Sorry,
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good.
I'm so enthusiastic about talking about this. Sorry, guys.
F1 Vista, do we assume that as there have been no further leaks that Scientology have paid a ransom of some sort? I think it's too early
Yeah,
to
I
make
agree.
that assumption. I did a bit of research into Chilin's previous hacks,
Yeah,
and there is no like track record. There's no habitual data release schedule, but from what I can tell, it seems to be about 3 weeks to just over a month, maybe 3 to 6 weeks after the initial documents are published, that they then publish all the files if they don't pay the ransom. So we're only a week or two into it. It's entirely possible Scientology paid and we're not going to get the rest. It's
right,
also entirely possible that they haven't yet paid and we're going to get all of the documents, but it's too early to tell.
right. And the document collection could be somebody's laptop, or it could be a server, or it could be multiple servers. We have no idea yet
Yeah.
where this came out of.
Yeah.
It's just too it's too broad of a shoot and too unspecific for us to know what specific part of the organization. Obviously, this isn't off the course supervisor's laptop, right? But or terminal, but we just don't know
Yeah.
enough yet.
Yeah. Love It Here has a great question. Does Scientology still forbid members from going on the internet? If so, and some novice goes on falling for a fake link, they're unprepared. I think it's important here to explain the difference between Sea Org and Class 5 staff and the roles within those things. As a Class 5 staff member, I was allowed access to the internet. Nobody stopped me from accessing the internet. I was just
Yep.
heavily dissuaded from using the internet to look up Scientology or whatever.
Right.
Sea Org
The
staff, it's
Mhm.
changed over the years. It's gone back and forth, and depending on security and so on. Most Sea Org staff in the UK, at least that I know, have a mobile phone because they need to be able to talk to each other within the base. That phone may or may not have internet access. It may or may not be censored. They're heavily discouraged from accessing the internet, and if they do, it is heavily censored. Public facing officials, OSA and so on, will have full access to the internet because they need to use that to look up what we're doing and so on. But if you're just a core supervisor and you're in the Sea Org at St. Hill, it's probably unlikely you have unfiltered access to the World Wide Web, but your computer station will use the internet to send files. For example, if you're telexing somebody at the other side of the base or at another base, that computer will use the internet to send that message to another, but it doesn't give you full unfiltered access to the World Wide Web. Is that a fair way of explaining it?
That's a great way of
Yeah.
explaining it. Yeah, it basically has filter software on the browsers,
Yeah.
right? So that you can't see certain things. You'll never be able to look up Xenu from inside the course room. The computer systems inside the orgs are centralized systems, right, with terminals, and they can run apps at the station, and then but all the data is kept on a centralized server. So,
Yeah.
so if they hack that system, then they would have gotten into a server. If they hack somebody's laptop connected to the server, then they might have just got the laptop. So that's why we don't know.
We don't
But
know.
generally speaking, yeah, Sea Org members do not have any level of unfiltered access to the internet unless they have their own devices. That the other thing that we have to say about this is like with the the anachronistic use of stat graphs and hard copy and papers and stuff. You find these waves of fad hit the bases where it's okay to use the phones, and then it's not okay to use the phones. It's okay to have internet access, then it's not okay to have internet access. So it really, from the outside, it's almost impossible for us to know from one day to the next exactly how much access somebody has. That's why we have to talk in these broad generalities about it. But we know for a fact that Sea Org members under the church's authority do not have unfiltered internet access at any time.
Yeah. There have been times when Scientology have installed software on people's devices so that they can't Google Scientology or whatever. And there have been times when they've been allowed to have phones, but they're checked every single day. There's been times when their phones have been taken away. There's been times when they've had phones, but they haven't had their data plans paid, so they can only use them to text and call. it's censored, it's filtered, but we don't know any more than that. It depends base to base, day to day.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. It's completely random and
Yeah.
depends on time and location. It really, really does. Probably we've said enough on that one, but yeah.
Miriam here has a great question. Hi, Miriam. Thank you for joining Scientology Up North. Joining late, or not question, but comment. Also, apparently, CLO EU got a new server donated by public because they were risking of losing everything. Shows very little concern. That's really
Wow.
interesting.
That's very interesting. And it may well be. I don't know any context other than the sentence you're saying here, but let me just say out loud, it could be that they used that, needed that server and have it operational right now and are using it, or it could be that somebody donated it to them and they were too proud to use it and threw it in the garbage. I've seen them do both. I've arranged for donations of computers when I was at the CLO in West US so that I could set up a network there. But then the biggest barrier to doing that was, is it really okay to be taking things from the public?
Yeah.
Like this was a moral dilemma that was organizational wide.
Yeah.
It was weird because I was like trying to get something done and I kept running into this. No, you can't do that because we have to pay for it ourselves. Otherwise, you're externally influenced, you jerk.
Public weren't allowed to, for example, buy even me as a staff member, right? I wasn't allowed to buy the flag banking officer who's a SEAL member a Starbucks coffee.
Exactly.
Because it's like, that's me paying for something for a SEAL member and they should be self-sufficient and, they don't need to take aid from a third party, even though you're a staff member. Yeah, there's a lot of stigma attached to that in Scientology.
That's right.
Interesting, Miriam. Thank you for that. And
thanks for that.
Definitely worth following up on. Love this from Xsign. Have an OT keep out the hackers with their powers.
Exactly. Yeah, Mr. Cause over computers.
Yeah. Love it here, saying, by the way, to all my chat mates who've escaped Scientology, I have nothing but love for you, deepest respect. I also have deepest compassion for all Scientology members still in, compassion and love. Thank you. I agree. 100%. Awesome. Question here from Peter Anderson. Question, how is the data breach any different from the thumb drive of documents that Mike Rinder left with and was later distributed? Did they care about the thumb drive? Well, they're different systems. They've been acquired in different ways, and it is very different in my mind.
The information that Mike brought out had proposed issues, reformations, documents, right, of Hubbard materials, the OSA network issues, and some other documents, if I remember right, but not like this kind of stuff. I don't remember him bringing out this level of stuff. I don't remember line item invoices and spreadsheets and stuff from Mike's data. I just remember the issues mainly, and it was interesting, but it wasn't exposure of criminal activity. So I would not put Mike's thumb drive on the same level as, at least my knowledge of Mike's thumb drive, right? In the same category as this. I think this is a far more exposing breach than what Mike came out with.
I think it's different as well because Mike's files were OSA documents. They were relating to harassment, fair game, covering up of crimes, all the sorts of things that OSA did that Mike was aware of, and he gave them to the FBI and reported them as soon as he got them.
That big data. That's right. All those files. That's just chaos. That's all OSA stuff. That's right.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Any of that.
But what there are some financials in there. Like I have seen, for example,
maybe I'm ignorant. Okay, fair enough.
But not in the same way. Like I've seen, for example, a breakdown of the square footage and the value of Scientology ideal orgs, right? That Scientology were in possession of in 2004 or whatever it was.
Right.
That document was there because it was in relation to a request from a journalist about how big Scientology is. So Mike Rinder, before responding to the journalist, wanted to know the square footage and value of all the properties. So somebody then found out that information, gave him the document. So there is some limited financial information in there relating to press stuff, but there's
But
not
not
like,
day-to-day invoice stuff.
it's not day-to-day invoices.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
kind of what I meant.
visas.
Yeah.
It's not this sort of stuff. So it's different, I think.
Yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
only thing I can say about it.
It basically, I guess we could say the nature of the data is different.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And therefore will have different ramifications.
Yeah.
Danielle asking here, question, do they keep CF info online in documents? I think when I was in, it was online, but not like, it's not like you could just log in and access from an external computer. All the CF
Right.
stuff was held on a server, presumably at London Org or at St. Hill. I don't know where the server was, but it was an internal thing that you only had access to from an internal computer, but you logged in through a device that also had access to the internet, because we had to use that system to send an email to someone through the CF folder. So there's an internet link in there, but you could only access it internally. But because of the
Right.
internet link, that makes it susceptible, is my understanding.
Mine as well. It's the architect. Let me say real fast, real simple. My understanding of any Scientology organization that you're going to walk into, what, London, Twin Cities, Denver, whatever, is there are 3 servers in their server room. There are more, but there's 3 basic ones. One of them is an internet server. So one of those is hard connected to the outside world. The other 2 are not.
Yeah.
And there's some kind of internal way for them to talk to each other, but it's built so that only one of those servers has an outside access line. And that's how they have it secured. I'm not saying that means it's a secure system. It probably isn't, but that's how they have it set up.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very well and good having 3 separate systems, one of which is connected to the internet. But if you have one computer that can access all 3, that's a weak point, because then all you
Well, that's
need
what
is
I
the
mean.
password to that one computer, right?
Yeah, they're physically separated,
Yeah.
and getting from one to the other is quite a process. It's not as simple, send somebody a link and they have full access to the other server.
Yeah.
That's why they're built that way, is to keep them separate.
Yeah.
And to add to that, one of those servers is like the CF server, it has all that data on it, but that's not the internet server.
Yeah.
So they do try to make some effort to keep these things distinct from one another. And it may well be that their measures held, that the way the hack was done, they didn't get and couldn't get access to the CF information. We just don't know. If there had been some screenshots of a CF system or something, we'd be having a different conversation about that.
But again, maybe they exist, they just haven't been released yet. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Talking about that ambulance at St. Hill, SP Crusader Leanie here is saying I've never seen an ambulance there. Have you, Alex? Yes, I have. At the IES event, it's parked in the car park. They're just stationed there for the IES event. You have to have medical staff on site. They're not running around responding to things. It's just so that if there is a 999 call, there's a response team on site. I have seen them there. They definitely do exist at the IES event. But they're not like on the gate, they're just parked in the car park.
Yeah, they got them parked out around back.
Yeah. Becky, Big Brother fan, I doubt the Russian hackers even realized the absolute gold within these documents.
Yeah.
Precisely.
They don't know anything about Scientology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely. Alrighty, last 2 that I've started here. Laurie Picheka, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you for having Alex on. Merry Christmas to you both. Can't wait to see your work in 2026. There we go.
Yay.
Likewise. And I think this is a good final one to end it on, unless you've got another you want to bring up, Chris.
What do we got?
Hans Christian Schwartz. Question. Anything you can tell us about the AOSH UK lockdown? Bloody Newt Gate.
Yeah, there we go. Newt Gate. That's what we should call it. I loved that Newt thing, by the way. You got some shout outs in the Tony show with me this week. We love that whole thing. Okay, lockdown. So when Incom was put on lockdown for 4 straight months, it was gruesome. It was a pre-hole kind of situation. It was the hole before the hole. That was sort of Miscavige's first test run at something like that. And I believe right now it would be no problem whatsoever for me to believe that the entire AOSH UK base is probably on lockdown. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that they're all sequestered to quarters or something. I think it's a lower conditions, base-wide treason condition kind of thing because of the flap of the protests and the IIS and now this. The attitude I communicated earlier, right? The missionaries are going to walk in there, and I'm pretty sure that there is a mission in the UK. I don't know how it's possible that a ransomware hack could occur at a Sea Org base and there's no mission sent. There would have to be a mission there.
I don't see a world in which in Scientology, there's the big IES protest flap that just happened, followed by the subsequent national and international press and media attention, followed by the pressure from local government on the marquee, the planning permissions, the licensing, and also a Russian hack. There is no way that stuff happens without there being a unit of people being fired out from LA over to handle the UK. Like, it's almost a certainty in my mind that is currently going on.
It's just a no-brainer. It's just not even like an option because this is exactly the sort of thing that these ethics missions are designed for. Mm-hmm. And an ethics mission is 2 or more Sea Org members showing up and basically carrying around sticks and pretty much almost beating on people. I mean, it gets pretty intense really fast, and everybody is in like serious trouble. And that goes on for weeks, months. You know, I mean, we had one in PAC in '96 that went on for like 3 or 4 months. So, you know, the UK base is not a fun place to be right now if you're a Sea Org member or Scientologist. They still have to deliver Scientology to the public. So all the smiles and the happy faces and all that stuff still have to go on. But then when the public aren't there or behind the scenes, it's torturous.
Yeah.
And that's not an exaggeration. It's tough. It's really tough for them right now.
Yeah. And I think it'll be interesting because this is the sort of thing that gets Sea Org staff to leave. Like, when you know, sometimes it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. When you've been sent to the RPF over and over again for stuff that's not your fault, and then finally these Russian hackers come along and you get put on the RPF again, when you know that it's had absolutely nothing to do with you, it's not your fault, there's nothing you could have done to stop it from happening. You know, this might just be the thing that someone needs to be like, that's it, I'm out, right? And when that person leaves and decides to talk, they will tell us what's gone on, and I think we're going to get a whole wealth of inside information from it.
I think so too. I think bookmark this, because I'll bet you in a few months or a year we're going to be hearing a lot more about this from somebody who's there right now. Tends to be how this goes, right? It took a long time for someone to come out of Incom and give the whole story of what we all now know. I mean, it took a few years for a man named Dan Garvin to get the fuck out of there and break it all down and put the entire thing on the internet. And that's the only reason we know everything we know about what happened at Incom. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that will repeat. On this one.
There we go. Well,
cool, man.
Chris, thank you so much for talking with me about this. I found this fascinating, and
me too.
More to come, I'm sure.
Absolutely. This is again. Let me just tell the audience on your channel. He's awesome.
Thanks. I thought you were going to plug your channel, and I was going to be like, no, go subscribe to Chris.
Yours. No, I got to tell you, man, you are just on top of it. This is really, really good stuff. And I know that, you know, if we get any new information or new revelations on this, we will definitely get back together, because this is a pretty hot topic thing for what's going on in Scientology right now. You know, this is about the wildest thing going on there. So besides the church's active endorsement of a serial rapist,
and that's a whole nother
Danny Masterson
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Could not believe what they did this last week on that. Actually couldn't believe it.
It's literally like Dave is very slowly losing his mind and getting more and more insane as the days go by, which is
Yep.
why I'm, again, another reason to believe that this hack is only going to drive him further down the path of insanity. And, you know, Mitch Brisker said to me when I was in LA once, I interviewed him, that hasn't been released yet. And he says, look, one day Dave is, I said, what do you think is going to bring down Scientology? And he said, one day Dave is going to flip. He's going to throw someone off the balcony at Flag or whatever. And there's going to be a body. And that's what's going to cause it all to come crumbling down, because he's just not going to be able to contain his rage any longer. And I think there's a real possibility in that, you know.
There are quite a few multiverses that have that outcome, and this could be one of them.
Yeah.
You know, let's put it that way.
There we go.
Yeah, well, no, the probability cloud of that is there's a lot. Yeah,
it's higher than nil. The probability,
it's higher than 0% chance. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's bad. It's pretty bad. That's a good point. That is how it could happen. Or it could be death by 1,000 cuts. It could be, there's so many ways. Yeah. One thing I love saying about the future is no matter what you think's coming, you're wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Well, look, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Please go and show Chris some love if you're not already subscribed. Press like, you know, comment, all that sort of stuff once the live stream's over down below the video. That helps push it out to more people. Let us know what you think. What do you want to see from these files? Like, if you could think of a document that exists that you would want to see next, I'd be interested to know, right? What would you want to see? What would you like to see come out of this? And you know, who knows if it will happen or not. But
do you know what would be the most wonderfully ironic leak? Would be if the Duke of Chug advice would leak. Because we've never seen it. We've only heard about it.
All right, Chris. Thank you so much. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.